Hi, I'm Ashton, and today I wanted to complain because I've never done that before, right? Also, I'm gonna be like spiking some chokers as I do this because I can never just do one thing at once, but I'm gonna talk about something that has been going around on the internet. I am here to discuss the Starbucks trans commercial. Now, I don't know when this video is gonna go up, but like this happened a month or so ago, and I've seen a lot of people praising it. Like I've seen a lot of people being like, oh, good job, Starbucks. Like this is so validating. This really shows that you're an ally. Like, wow, this is really impactful. This is really empowering. And I hate it. I think this commercial is not very impactful, not very empowering. In fact, it seems more to me like they are using trans folks to get, you know, woke points or social justice points or whatever. It does not seem very genuine to me. It seems more like a grab for attention done by a giant corporation. And yes, this video is an anti-capitalist rant. Surprise, surprise. So if you haven't seen the video that I'm talking about, I'm not going to show it or do like a reaction because it's all over the internet. So many trans people, especially trans men, have done reactions to it and been like, wow, this is so touching. I don't want to call any of them out in particular, but I do have a more radical perspective, so I wanted to share that. So if you haven't seen the video that I'm talking about, it's pretty easy to find. Just search like Starbucks trans ad or trans commercial Starbucks. You'll find the ad pretty easily, and you'll also find a lot of trans people like reacting to the ad. I hate to be like the downer in this situation, and I'm glad that some people do feel validated by it. I'm glad that some people do see it as good advertising, I guess, but I'm very, very skeptical of companies. I don't think they're your friends. And when they do an ad campaign that like uses a minority demographic or an oppressed demographic, they have to be really fucking careful about it. And I don't think Starbucks did a good job. If you haven't seen the commercial that I'm talking about, it's an ad campaign that Starbucks put out. It's about a minute 30 seconds, and it features a young trans man, a young trans boy, you know, getting called his dead name over and over. Which, first of all, do you need to dead name a trans character over and over and over again in order to make a point? Is that necessary? You could have done it, God, I don't know. I feel like there's so many other ways to show a character experiencing transphobia that isn't directly dead naming that character and like disrespecting that character in a way, right? It's very uncomfortable for me to watch a trans man be dead named over and over and over again and then named the correct way once, and when he is, it's by this giant corporation, right? To kind of show themselves as the good guy. So for me watching it, I didn't feel like this happiness when he got called his name for the first time. I didn't feel like safer at a Starbucks. It just kind of made me feel like, oh, great, Starbucks is using my identity to get, you know, some social justice points. And a lot of people gave them those social justice points. And I don't want to like complain about that. Like, yeah, I'd rather a company be like, hey, we support trans people than, hey, fuck trans people. But this commercial did feel like a little bit of a fuck you to me because over and over they decided, hey, let's just dead name this trans person on camera. And I know he's a character, and I know, you know, it's a fictional thing, but it just feels wrong to me for their representation to include a trans man being dead named over and over and over and over. And maybe it's meant to like show cis people, hey, look, this is hurtful. But I feel like there are better ways to do that, and you don't have to demonstrate transphobia happening over and over again for it to be impactful. Now, let's talk about the actual issues I have with this, because, you know, on the surface level, like, of course I have the issues that I've already explained. Like, I just don't think dead naming a trans character over and over again is good representation or good allyship. I think it's uncomfortable and alienates trans people a little bit, at least for me. I have definitely seen some other trans people also feeling alienated by it. I'm not alone here. It is generally more radical trans people like myself. A lot of the people that I've seen reacting to it are like fellow white trans guys and binary trans guys. And I'm not saying I have any like more intellect than them because I'm non-binary. But you know, I'm definitely more on the radical end of politics compared to a lot of people on YouTube. I definitely have some different perspectives, so I wanted to share them. Anyways, my point is I've seen a lot of people also being uncomfortable with this commercial, so I know I'm not alone in this, and I don't want to express that like I'm above everybody else because I have this different opinion. I don't want this to come across that way. Also, I'm editing currently, I'm sorry, but when it comes to activism and like, you know, good things for the trans community, please, for the love of God, listen to trans people. Listen to especially like trans people that are more marginalized than just being trans. Listen to the actual struggles people have been through. Do not look at a commercial that a company's put out and be like, oh, this is activism. It's not activism. Grassroots activism is very important. Activism of individuals in trans communities and trans communities as a whole is very important. The activism, quote unquote, of giant corporations that, you know, use trans people for social good points is not activism that you should be like taking as, you know, good, like big, you know, big giant activism. Just my other issue with the commercial as a whole is it just feels like it's exploiting trans pain. It's not there to say like, look how good our coffee is. Trans people enjoy it too. Like, here's a trans person. But the first, like, the majority of the commercial is like, look at this trans man in pain. Look at this trans man being dead named. Wow. Painful. Like, yeah, okay, I get it. Anyways, so those are my issues with the commercial, like, on a surface level. But if you look even deeper, there are a lot more issues with this. Now, I'm going to be linking a bunch of sources down in the description, both for the original ad campaign as well as some sources that I'm pulling from to provide you with this information that I'm about to talk about. The thing is, putting diversity into commercials for your company is very surface level. And I've seen plenty of posts also online about trans people like, hey, you should work for Starbucks because they give you surgery benefits. And they do, that's true. That can be good. However, Starbucks has had a lot of issues with trans employees in the past, and I wanted to talk about some of those because they are really recent. And I think it's a big issue for Starbucks to be putting out an ad of, wow, look how wonderful we are to trans people, we're such allies, and then turn around and go to court with a trans woman because she's being abused and you don't believe she's being abused. I'll get to that a little bit later, but so there's a BuzzFeed article. I know BuzzFeed isn't the most trustworthy source. However, they talk to multiple trans people that actually work at Starbucks, and while BuzzFeed may not be a trustworthy source, people that have actually worked at Starbucks and are trans, I believe, are trustworthy sources about being trans while working at Starbucks. So this first person on their list is a trans man that works at Starbucks, and the system in Starbucks greeted him with his dead name. When he talked to corporate about it, they said they couldn't do anything until his name was legally changed, which I think is particularly interesting because in this commercial, it's focused on names, right? They're like, come to our store, we'll call you by your right name because you'll tell us your name. But if you're working there and you haven't changed your legal name, fuck you, we won't call you by the right name. Like, it's just such an interesting juxtaposition that when it comes to, you know, their customers and people that they want money from, they are totally willing to do whatever you want. But if you're working for them, they don't give a shit. The same trans man got outed to his staff, despite explicitly telling his supervisor that he didn't want to be outed. He tried reaching out to corporate about the legal name change issue. They didn't respond ever until he made a viral tweet about it. Starbucks does not care about its trans workers until everybody else cares. They don't care until there's mass outrage. They want to look good. They don't care if they actually are good. And that's the issue with companies as a whole being diverse in ways, you know? Unless they're getting praise for it, unless they are getting more customers and more money for it, they do not care if they're diverse. They do not care about trans rights or any other type of rights. They just want the money. So they don't care about trans people unless it's impacting their public image. They just want the money. Corporations do not care about you. And I feel like that's something that I need to get across. Corporations are not your friends. And that's something that a lot of people forget, especially when they're praising big companies like Starbucks for having diversity in their commercials. The diversity that they show off in their commercials does not matter. They just want this good social media points for it. And I know I'm adding to that by talking about them. H Farmer Guy has a great video about like outrage marketing and brands on social media. And I, you know, hesitated a lot to make this video because I didn't want to bring attention to something and give more attention to Starbucks, but also this has been talked about so much within trans communities. And I feel like if I can add an opinion in a more public setting that is against the commercial, that's probably going to be better than just being silent about it and not adding, you know, a contrasting opinion to the one that a lot of people have had. So in 2018, Starbucks announced that they were expanding their gender affirming policies for insurance policies, which is, you know, fine and good. However, it didn't work for everybody. And one of these people talks in that same article about like, well, I worked there and I wanted top surgery and they just couldn't cover it. They just didn't cover it. And he did end up getting top surgery later after he left the company. But like, they can talk all they want about how good their insurance policy is for trans people, but if they aren't actually doing anything, then what's the fucking point? I know some people have gotten their surgeries covered through Starbucks. Good for them. I'm very proud of you if that's you. But the fact that it isn't working for everybody and that people are still being denied, that fucking sucks. Starbucks can't call themselves these big trans allies if not everybody that needs gender affirming surgery is being covered. They can't be so selective. Even if they have that insurance coverage policy up in corporate and stuff, it doesn't impact everybody, because the people that are the lower wage workers, people that are working really hard, baristas, people like that, they may get those same insurance benefits, but they are so much harder to access. The working class, I sound like a fucking communist, I'm sorry, I am. Starbucks does not care about the working class, they care about their image and how much money they can make off of trans people. So aside from complaints from a lot of individual trans Starbucks workers about not getting the benefits that Starbucks promises, or their managers misgendering them, outing them, the system not using their correct name, all of those things are awful and shitty. Possibly the absolute worst thing Starbucks is currently still doing in relation to trans people. They took a trans woman to court who used to work for them because they simply do not believe that transphobia is harassment. So a trans woman, Maddie Wade, used to work at a Starbucks, and her manager harassed her consistently for being trans. Her manager cut her hours when she came out as trans. Her manager started posting shitty things on social media in relation to trans people. She was constantly misgendered by her manager. She eventually ended up switching Starbucks locations, and this harassment continued at the new location. So Maddie had to go through a lot at Starbucks in relation to transphobia, and corporate did not give a shit. So she sued the company for harassment and discrimination because, you know, her hours were cut. She was constantly misgendered. People were harassing her on social media, on and on and on. All these terrible things that happened to her at a Starbucks. And I think she's in the right. Like, she's being discriminated against. I'm glad that she's standing up for herself, and I hope that she gets what she sued them for. But Starbucks is like pushing against her. They're arguing that what their managers did to her, the misgendering, the harassment, the consistent transphobia, they're arguing that none of that is bias, none of that is discrimination. So I want people that really like this ad to realize that while Starbucks was filming and working on this ad where they're like, look how lovely we are to our transgender patrons, at the same time, they're going against a trans woman in court, telling her that misgendering, harassment, transphobia, social media hate, harassment, all of that stuff simply isn't transphobia and doesn't matter, and they will not be compensating her, and they will not be giving her hours back, they will not be helping her with health insurance, because they don't actually care about trans people. They care about getting money. They care about putting on this public persona of look how much we care about trans people, and then turning around and going to court against a trans woman because it's not bias, it's not transphobia. We did not actually harass her. Again, I'll be linking the source for this in the description, possibly multiple sources. But yeah, a trans woman is suing Starbucks for harassment, and they just don't think that misgendering is bias. That doesn't seem to align with the message that commercial put out, does it? Oh, and the manager that is harassing Maddie, who posted things about genitals on Facebook, who consistently dead-named and misgendered her in front of her coworkers and in front of customers, the person that continually transphobically harassed their employee, he still has a job. He has not been fired. Starbucks does not care about the health or safety of trans people. They care about their public persona. They care about what they put out in ads. They care about how people talk about them. They do not care about the actual rights, the actual safety, the actual happiness of trans people, because they're a corporation. Their goal is to get money. Their goal is not to protect trans people. I don't like people looking at that commercial and thinking, you know, wow, Starbucks is really doing this for trans rights. Because they aren't. Starbucks is doing it to save face. So Maddie was talking to news outlets about this case, right? And something that she said that I really think like kind of exemplifies this whole situation is there seems to be a severe disconnect from the ideologies put forth by Starbucks corporate and the policies applied on a local level. There are many people out there suffering in similar circumstances. They need to know that this is a battle that can be won. We need to know that we don't have to be quiet and move on, which many believe is the only option. I think she's right. I'm really glad she's doing what she's doing, but it fucking sucks that Starbucks still gets this very, you know, liberal, like good boy, progressive persona online, and that people are still praising them when shit like this is happening all over the place. And even when corporate policies are good, corporate doesn't make changes with local Starbucks. Like, you know, Maddie's manager, who's an awful transphobe and harassed her and is terrible on every level that you can be, Starbucks doesn't care. He still has a job. He has not been fired. So when you see commercials like this, not just in Starbucks, from any large corporation, please remember that those are businesses, those are corporations, those are not your friends, those are not people fighting for social justice, those are not people fighting for any sort of equality. Those are people that want to save face. Those are people that put on a mask of equality, of love, of, you know, giving people the right name when they're trans, even when, you know, in smaller situations, they don't do that. You know, and there are so many trans people that first heard their chosen name at a Starbucks, and that's cool, and I don't want to discredit that. But you can go into a Starbucks and tell them your name is Snoopy or Denver, Colorado, and they'll put it on a cup. What they will do is write Snoopy or Denver, Colorado on a cup or whatever you want. What they won't do is protect their trans workers, because they do not care about trans people. They care about the money that they can get from us. Please remember that. Corporations are not your friends. The advertisements corporations put out that focus on diversity are more to get attention and get money than they are to actually push forward on progressive ideals. And also please remember that's not the only shitty thing Starbucks does. While they're making these ads about inclusion and diversity, while they're selling those mermaid tail cookies that, you know, give a bit of money to Mermaids UK, which is cool, good, I do support that, they're still paying Black workers less. Very, very recently, a union came out and talked about how they did a study of wages across airport Starbucks, and Black workers are being paid as a median $1.85 less than white workers. I wonder why. Couldn't be systemic racism. There's no way. There's no way it's systemic racism. It's just a coincidence, right? That's a pretty large difference you got there, Starbucks. And at some airports, it's even worse. At a Houston airport, Black workers are paid almost $3 less than their white counterparts. Hello? Like, Starbucks is not a good company. There's no such thing as a good company. Big, giant companies that make a shit ton of money, they aren't good. Corporations are not good. And I don't want to come across as, you know, that angry communist, even though I am. Like, I feel like I'm justified to be angry about a company using diversity for social justice points and then turning around and a trans woman, you know, comes out about their terrible policies and they just ignore it. They're just like, no, 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 your manager is in the right. We're going to keep giving him a job. You don't get healthcare benefits. We are not going to compensate you. They don't care. And I know people that watch me regularly are probably going to agree with me, and you're probably going to see this video and be like, yes, good content, Ashton. But I worry about, you know, the trans men that have made videos talking about this ad and being like, oh, it's so validating to see this trans man being named correctly at a Starbucks for the first time. And like, yeah, because that is a pretty common experience among trans folks. I've heard a lot of trans people talking about going to a coffee shop, not necessarily Starbucks, but, you know, going and saying their name and having their name called when their order's ready. And that's a cool experience, and I'm glad that so many of us get that experience. The first time that we hear our name in public is not thanks to those large corporations. It's thanks to our bravery and our strength of talking about our preferred name and coming out. It is not thanks to those large corporations. It's thanks to those individual workers, those working class people that call your name out. It's not the corporation. It's good people, people as individuals, and, you know, unions that talk about the pay gap between Black and white workers. That's important shit. That is stuff that we need to listen to. We don't need to listen to corporate propaganda about how great and how inclusive their company is when behind closed curtains, they're still dead naming trans workers. It's just something to think about, and I think it's something that we need to recognize. So here's my advice. When corporations, Starbucks or any other corporation, puts out an ad that seems real progressive, or, you know, shows a trans person, or, oh my god, shows a diversity of people being employed, do not listen to that ad. Seek out the employees of the company. Seek out what unions say about the company. Don't listen on face level about what that company does for minority groups or oppressed groups. Because oftentimes they're going to lie to save face. They are going to say, wow, look at our commitment to loving trans people, when they actually aren't that committed at all. Anyways, I'm gonna sign off now because I'm getting, this is a lot to, you know, talk about and not get angry. Keep in mind when you're looking at corporations that they don't actually care about you. They care about how they can make money off of you. Starbucks doesn't actually care about its trans employees. They care about how they look. They care about how many good boy points they can get. They don't care about you. They're a corporation. They're not your friend. Please, I beg of you, don't look at ads and take them for face value. You know, when another company next week comes out with an ad that supports trans people, don't immediately retweet it and talk about how great it is. Look into that company's policies. See if any of their employees are suing them, you know? Trust the working class people that actually work there and actually experience their policies. Don't just look at an ad and take it for face value. Companies lie. Companies will lie. The people way high up at Starbucks are not motivated to make social change. They're motivated to make more money. I know it's very easy to look at that ad and think it's cute, but remember that like not dead naming and not misgendering a trans person is like the bare minimum of respect, and Starbucks like showcasing that as their giant form of allyship while their managers are actively oppressing trans people and their policies are actively hurting trans people. If you're a trans person and you work at a Starbucks, or you like really support Starbucks for whatever reason, that's cool, that's fine, but please remember that not everybody is as lucky as you to have whatever good experiences you have had. And until there's literally no issues at all with Starbucks and trans people, I cannot say in good faith that they're, you know, huge trans allies. And if you ever catch me praising a giant corporation for whatever progressive ideals they uphold, then know that I either have lost it or have done a shit ton of research and actually believe what I'm saying. So yeah, I think I'm gonna cut it off there. Thanks for listening to me ramble about how much I hate performative allyship and the way that capitalism corrupts. Sorry for a more negative video today. My next video is going to be a very, very long Q&A with my friend A, where we talk about college and gender and a bunch of fun stuff. We had a lot of fun filming it, and it's taking me a long time to edit because there's an hour and 30 minutes of footage. This video is also pretty long, but next video will be fun and lighthearted, I promise. I'm sorry this one was so down on capitalism, but sometimes you gotta talk about things because when leftist politics and queer shit intersect, you know I'm gonna be right there talking about why it's actually shitty. I hope you learned something today, or maybe at least thought about how you can kind of rethink the way that corporations shape their public image versus what they actually do behind closed doors. Goodbye, comrades. I hope that you know not to trust corporations because corporations are not your friends, and I will talk to you later, maybe.